Wii Tanks. Remember that game that came out more than 15 years ago? In the last couple of years, I feel like we've all collectively remembered the game and how fun it was. After being excited from the wave of Playdate unboxing videos that came out last week, I thought it would be an interesting challenge to tackle making a Wii Tanks prototype for the Playdate, but with a twist, using the crank to control the angle of the barrel. Let's see how it went. First step was just to get the tank moving. I took this tank sprite and made it so you can move in 4 different directions, and I made sure to make the tank face the direction you are moving. My next task was to create the barrel, but I ran into an issue. The Playdate has no GPU, and the CPU isn't super powerful, so rotating the barrel in real time would cause performance issues. A simple solution to this was to first draw 16 different angles that the barrel could be rotated at, and to snap the barrel to those positions based on the angle of the crank. My next task was to allow the player to shoot a tank shell. I first created a projectile that shoots out in the direction of the barrel, but it was coming out from the center of the tank, so I added an offset so it looked like the shell was shooting out from the tip of the gun, which was looking pretty good. I wanted to give the player a health system, so I took the heart system from my last game, this roguelike I made for the Playdate, and added it in. I then planned on making an enemy, but first I wanted to tackle something that would make things way better to work with. I was originally using a hand-drawn image for the shell, but since it was just a simple circle with an outline, I realized that I could easily generate this image from code, and it would allow me to make different size projectiles for different enemy types. I added that functionality into the game, and you can see here that I'm shooting small bullets with a radius of 4 pixels, and these are bigger ones with a radius of 9. You probably also noticed the purple outline on the tanks and the shells. Those are collision boxes that I added in as well, which scale with the projectile size. I didn't implement any functionality yet, so you can see that they just get stuck when they hit the enemy tank. With that in mind, I made it so that the shells disappear on contact and damages the enemy, and when an internal health value hits 0, the enemy tanks get destroyed. It feels really unsatisfying right now since there's no feedback, so I added some screen shake and it feels much better. Ideally, I would also add some particle effects, but I didn't have time to look into that yet. It was starting to feel pretty good just moving around and shooting the enemy. As of this point, the player could just go outside the bounds of the game, so I added some walls to stop the player. At first, I made it a bit too thin, so you can actually point your barrel outside of the walls and shoot past it. This is a problem because the projectiles will actually travel forever, eventually going too far and crashing the game. I just fixed it by increasing the wall size. However, while testing this fix, I realized that I forgot to give the player an attack cooldown, so you can just spam the shells. It was a quick fix, so now the player can only shoot every half a second. It was getting a bit boring just shooting at a tank that doesn't fight back, so it was time to give the enemy some attack AI. I started off by getting the enemy to aim at the player using some basic trigonometry, which I end up using a lot more regularly than I thought I would back in high school. On this note, I've written detailed comments in my codebase where I explain how I implemented mechanics like this and notes on my game architecture, which is available to all my awesome Patreon supporters as a thank you for funding the creation of these videos. Next, I set up a little timer to have the enemy tank shoot at the player. You'll notice that I leveraged the system I wrote earlier to have the enemy shoot smaller shells. Since there are only 16 angles, you can kind of get into this dead zone where the enemy can't hit you, but I'm hoping with more enemies it won't be an issue. I wanted to have it so if you hit the enemy tank shell, it cancels out the bullet. So, as the final task for this week, I added that functionality as well. Next, I'm planning on adding more enemies, enemy movement, more levels, and more. So subscribe to not miss that video and other awesome Playdate content. I post every single Monday. If you like this video, I think you'll like this one where I made a roguelike game for the Playdate. Go check it out if you haven't already.